The Nintendo 3DS was the console I mostly played on during my middle school years, as the games released on the console were plentiful, and that's where Nintendo was striving while they were pretty much having a rough time with the home console business with the Wii U. A lot of Nintendo's subsidiaries were prioritizing the 3DS since it was the more popular console, meaning that it would sell a lot better. And because of this, we have a lot of outstanding games for the 3DS, like we've got Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon, Zelda: Link Between Worlds, and of course, Pokemon, as that's always the main thing for the Nintendo handhelds. But among all the Nintendo IPs on the 3DS, none of them had much of a more fascinating success, like Fire Emblem. For those who don't know, Fire Emblem is a tactical RPG series that's been around since the very Famicom days. This game series was made by Intelligent Systems. You may be familiar with them with the Paper Mario series. Fire Emblem, while it was a recurring series on Nintendo, never really sold that much on any other console. But when the Nintendo 3DS hit, Intelligent Systems decided to conclude the series with one final ambitious game. The end result was a game that received universal acclaim, and it sold pretty damn well. To the point where Fire Emblem basically, instead of concluding, had a massive resurgence. And it's still getting releases to this very day, with the most recent one at the time being Fire Emblem Engage. My personal history of Fire Emblem was that I knew the game series was around, but I never really got into the series. Until I tried out the GBA title, which honestly was pretty enjoyable for the most part. But my first game at the time playing Fire Emblem was actually the one we're talking about in this video, Fire Emblem Awakening. As to promote the game, Nintendo released a demo for this game, and I did play through the demo. Although despite the fact that I did play through the demo, I didn't really pick it up at all. That was because around the time I was 11 years old and getting a job was pretty much out of the picture. So I was pretty much prioritizing other games around the time, like Mario & Luigi Dream Team, for example. I did eventually get the game on my Nintendo 3DS digitally, but even then it was still on my backlog, until now. As I'm finally able to record 3DS footage for the very first time instead of using simple stock footage on the internet and such, so I thought why not to get this game out of the backlog while testing out the 3DS's capture ability. Now before I start this video, I should also mention a big warning about this. This is my first time ever going through a Fire Emblem game at all. Well, at least the modern entries, because I did play the GBA ones years ago. So there might be a chance I may accidentally leave out certain aspects of the game due to me not being familiar with this series. So this will be more of a light review for those who aren't familiar with Fire Emblem as well. Because I feel like there are some other YouTubers out there that could cover this game a lot better than me. In fact, I have a couple of friends in the friend group that are big fans of Fire Emblem, and pretty much when they have a conversation, I'm pretty much out of the league with this. And from what they've said, Fire Emblem Awakening is probably the best gateway to the series out of the modern entries, especially compared to the ones on Nintendo Switch, where they try to be more experimental. It's their words, not mine, so I should give you a heads up on that. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. So when the game starts, you read to an avatar you can customize its design. You could customize anything like his face, have the color of the hair and such, and even his voice. Pretty much the basis of any other custom character. His canonical name in the game is Robin, but for this playthrough and such, I'm naming him, Spyro. Yes, Spyro. But anyway, so the story starts with a flash forward, I think, where Spyro and Chrom are battling this mysterious wizard which ends up getting Chrom impaled. We're now at the present time where Spyro is awakened and seeing Chrom with his little sister Lisa, discovering him. Spyro does recognize Chrom, but for some reason he doesn't know his own name. Therefore, he gets the title Spyro. And yes, this is canon because it says there on the dialogue. After getting to know each other, the local town gets attacked, with the crew eventually defeating the invaders with no problem. Later that night, around a campfire as Spyro was munching down delicious food after eating for God knows how long, they are suddenly ambushed as a portal in the sky suddenly appears, releasing a herd of zombie knights. And then suddenly this mysterious masked figure suddenly comes out of the portal as well to help out with the heroes. This soldier claims to be called Marth, yes, the same Marth from the original Famicom games. For some reason they tried to play the whole thing where it's a female trying to pretend to be a male thing, kinda like with Mulan for example. Because not too long after, it was revealed that Marth was a female this entire time. And everyone was pretty much surprised by this fact, but all I could think about was the Mr. X from Mega Man. However, what was really surprising is that her name is actually Lucina, but not only that, but she's also Chrome's daughter in the future who went back in time to stop an evil entity from destroying the world. And there's more into the story with this game, but I don't want to really go too deep into spoilers and such. The only reason why I mentioned the Lucina thing because it was pretty much mentioned during the Smash trailers and such. But overall, I felt like the story itself was pretty solid for the most part. With the only issue I have is that, for some reason, Fire Emblem Awakening is divided into two separate stories in the game. Where the first part is that it's mostly focused on stopping the Mad King, while the other part it leans more into the Lucina plotline. But regardless, the whole motivation in the story in the game is that Chrome is trying to protect his kingdom. And I've gotta say, the pre-runner cutscenes that they have in this game looks pretty good even by 2013 3DS standards. Especially if you use the 3D slider all the way up. And on top of that, a few years later, Intelligent Systems then released a Blu-ray combo pack with all the cinematic cutscenes from the 3DS games, so now you're able to watch the cutscenes in full HD, which is really cool. And as for the gameplay, Fire Emblem Awakening leans mostly towards the battle system, as there's not necessarily an overall in this game compared to other RPGs. Unless you count this world map, but I'll talk about this later. So for the battle mechanics in this game, it's pretty much this. Your primary agenda in the game is to take out all the enemies or take out its leader. You take control and move around about 10 to 12 soldiers in the field. And how this works is that it's pretty much similar to something like a chess game, where you have to put your characters down in certain parts of a grid. Actually, now that I think about it, I think Fire Emblem would fit well as a board game, kind of like a Dungeons & Dragons kind of thing. But anywho, there are multiple places where you can put the soldier, like putting them in the fortress so it can heal them gradually, or sometimes there's a sparkly thing on the field that'll either raise your stats or give you a certain item. However, even though you can move through a lot of places, there are certain areas where only a certain amount of soldiers can go through. For example, there are certain soldiers in this game that'll ride flying horses, aka Pegasus, meaning that they can fly over certain objects and such, and fly over stuff like cliffs. With one of the chapters being a good example, where there's an ambush of soldiers that comes from the cliffside, but you can't get to them since they're flying in the air. But luckily this game has a good telling on which soldiers you can attack and which ones you can't, as the soldiers you're able to get are the ones that are highlighted with a red glow. A lot of times you have to be just right next to them to attack, but with certain soldiers like the mages or the archers, they can get them through a distance. Instead of getting experience points by defeating the enemy, you'll get experience points every time you try to attack the soldiers. However, if you do defeat them, you do get a greater amount of experience points. Now, a lot of goals in the battle system is try to defeat the captain. However, it's not always the best just to go head on. It's best to shave off the army piece by piece and eventually get to the captain for last. Or try to find the best route to avoid getting caught by the enemies, because when the enemies turn, they will all go swarming against you. Like in this chapter, for example, where I was pretty much in a bit of a rush, and I am getting most of my soldiers killed in the process because of it. So basically, it's best to keep all the soldiers together. Or if it's a job to get rid of all the enemies, it's best to split them in half. That way you have certain soldiers to help other soldiers. Not only that, but if you find 12 soldiers a bit overwhelming, you can group 2 of them together, that way you can have less of work, and they are much more powerful as well. As if you pair 2 soldiers together, they'll get a good amount of stat boost as well. And that's when the relationship system comes in, because the stronger their bond is, the more effective they are in battles. Which is very satisfying to see, especially when they do a good combo and ends with a good KO. So it's best to try and group everyone together as much as they can. Especially if you try to pair one class with another, that way you can have both advantages at the same time. With the only con is that whoever's out in the open will get hit, so if you have a mage for example and try to heal someone, a soldier will try to attack them instead of their bigger partner. Now with the original Fire Emblem games, The main thing that was very well known for them is the permadeath feature, where basically if a soldier dies in the field, they'll be gone forever, you cannot revive them at all. Which was a pretty interesting challenge, but starting with the Nintendo DS game, they added a brand new option, which is a casual mode, where if a soldier dies, instead of losing them forever, you just can't use them for the rest of the battle. Which is something I prefer a bit more, because it would be more frustrating than devastating to lose a character on the field. But I'm also glad that they made this an option, so for those who want a good amount of challenge from this, they can still do it. Now if you still feel like your character is a bit underpowered to get through the next chapter, you can always go through these optional battle maps where you can grind up for EXP and such. And there's even some optional side quests you can do throughout the world map. Not only that, but if you complete certain chapters, they'll also open up various shops that you can use to get more items or forge more stronger weapons. You can also get these special items that can boost your stats, but more importantly, upgrade your class. That way you can transform some of your soldiers into powerful beasts that can annihilate anything in its path. So there's pretty much a great amount of planning, variety, and such for each of the battle you go on to keep yourself on your feet. And now graphically, this game looks really good for the Nintendo 3DS. I already put my praises on the pre-rendered cutscenes, but for the in-game stuff in the environments and the characters and everything, it looks really good for the console it's on. And the battle scenes where the soldiers are duking out really looks good. The choreography in the game looks pretty solid, especially if you're using that 3D slider. Especially with the mages, where they have these amazing particle lights which looks very stellar. I also like how in the overview shot, to represent all the characters, they turn into these cute little pixel art soldiers. They could have just made them into 3D models, but I honestly like this because it makes the characters pop a lot more in the background. The music in this game is also pretty good, however, I don't really remember any of the songs to be honest. I think I was focusing a bit too much on everything else besides the soundtrack. The only one I do remember was the main theme for the game, and also the title screen. But is it me, or does the title screen music sound something from a Disney movie or something? I don't know why, but I was just thinking of that when I was listening to it. It's still a pretty good piece though. And that was Fire Emblem Awakening, and as for someone who has never really fully played through a Fire Emblem game, it was a pretty good time. The gameplay loop in this game is a lot more refined from the GBA games that I played a while back, which is always nice to see from evolution in the series. And I do see why people consider this as one of the best Fire Emblem games in the series. It's a pretty good, cute little game. If you've never played a Fire Emblem game, I highly recommend trying this one out. It's pretty fun. But if you don't own a 3DS, I recommend trying the ones on Nintendo Switch. I've never really played them myself, but I've heard from friends that are big fans of Fire Emblem that these games are pretty good. Although I would be down if Intelligent Systems did make a remaster of this game in particular, mostly because it was the one that did save the franchise, so I feel like this game does deserve something like a console release. Well, since I'm finally able to record stuff on Nintendo 3DS, why don't we try this with another 3DS game? So for the next time we'll be here, we'll be talking about Kirby Triple Deluxe. Now this is another 3DS game I've never played before, and I'm very curious on how well it holds up. But that'll do for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye-bye! Hey, this is going a bit unscripted, but, so I was editing the video during a VC with friends and such, the ones I talked about who are fans of Fire Emblem, and I talked about stuff from my impressions of the game, and I brought up a point where I was confused why certain enemies in the game, they all go dramatic when they die. That's when I learned the hard way that apparently you can ally yourself with some of the enemies to recruit them on your side. And apparently I accidentally killed a lot of my friends' favorite characters in the game. Oops.